Tobias Andermann is a scientist at the Gothenburg Global Biodiversity Center and the University of Gothenburg. Tobias was one of the researchers of the new study. Thanks so much indeed for joining us, Tobias. Tell us how you reached this conclusion. Was it because of the climate crisis or because of overpopulation?
Yeah, thank you for having me. What we find in our study is that essentially almost all of the mammal extinctions of the last 100,000 years are human-driven. So that actually climate itself does not pose a major risk to species per se, but only does so in the very recent years in combination with intense human pressure, like habitat fragmentation and deforestation.
But presumably, and it's difficult to ask you to make this kind of judgment because I understand that you're a scientist, but presumably if you look back through the science of the past, it's found that when it's humans versus animals, there's only ever going to be one winner. I mean, clearly we have to change the way we live, but if we continue to do this, you're saying that 550 plus species are going to go extinct, presumably because you, even though you're a scientist, when you look at the hard facts, the humans always win that battle.
Yeah, except it's not really anymore about winning a battle or anything. I mean, in the past, our ancestors probably had to hunt for survival. They basically had to, many of the megafauna species went extinct, possibly because of hunting. But then there are so many other human pressures that are actually acting at the moment at unprecedented scales. Things like industrial mining and the big market with endangered species, and all of that stuff is actually not necessary for our human, parts of it are necessary for survival or for like our economy, but we have to basically find a good balance where we are aware of the impact that we have on the natural world and on how we can live somewhat more in harmony with the natural world. And there's a lot we can do in that regard.
Tell us more. Did your research look into possible recommendations about what actions would be most effective in saving mammal species?
I must say not particularly. We looked at it more from the statistical side, and there are many organizations, many non-governmental organizations like the WWF that are on the ground doing amazing conservation work, and it is essentially, it depends on the species, it depends on the environment, which specific conservation strategy would be the best. But there is a lot we can do also on a personal level. So there are active conservation measures, but then there are also things that we can do, like adjusting our consumer behavior and also to some extent our political choices.
Tobias, I mean, apart from the emotion that we might feel about something like the gorillas that we've just been showing in the pictures going extinct, what is the importance of biodiversity to human beings?
Well, I would say there are different aspects how biodiversity manifests itself as an important element of our world, of our reality, and of our shared planet. So there's, first of all, somewhat of a responsibility, I would say, to preserve the natural world that we co-inhabit with so many species. It is very easy to fall into this perspective, like we as a human species just want to maximize our output in many ways, but like we do have somewhat of a moral obligation and towards other species on this planet. But then there's also we are maybe not aware of how much we depend on many species to keep ecosystems alive. For example, to keep forests going. We know that, for example, the extinction of certain species can majorly alter the landscape, which then in return will also have effects for humans that depend on these landscapes, or for maybe different industries that also depend on it. So there are many like cascading effects that can actually occur once certain key species disappear. But it's not only about the pragmatism, but also about this moral responsibility that we have.
At the Global Biodiversity Center where you work, how much are you approached by governments, by private companies, by NGOs to play an active role in advising them about what their actions should be?
So the Biodiversity Center, the Gothenburg Global Biodiversity Center, is a rather new institution. We just started about 3 years ago. And we have many partners here in the area. So we are located at the west coast of Sweden. there's a lot of fishery going on here. There's a lot of also, generally marine research. And we are essentially positioning ourselves as a sort of an interface between the research world, which sometimes becomes a little bit of an isolated thing by itself, and then the public and the industry, because we feel like the strong need to communicate more, because many scientific publications are mainly read by other researchers, but hardly ever make it out to the public. And that's really where we as an organization want to bridge this gap and translate scientific results more in a more understandable format that actually can be then applied in future conservation measures.
Which is exactly why I asked you the question, so thanks very much for the answer. Tobias, thank you so much. Tobias Andermann speaking to us from Gothenburg.